Nobody wants me. Clara Bennett's voice broke as she stood alone in the center of the Silver Creek dance hall. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then the laughter began. It started with 3 women seated near the front, but quickly spread through the crowded hall until Clara wished the wooden floor beneath her would simply open and let her disappear. At 68 years old, with silver-gray hair gathered in its familiar neat low bun, wearing her faded burgundy prairie dress beneath her worn charcoal wool shawl, Clara suddenly felt every one of her years. She had not meant to embarrass herself. The Spring Partners Dance had been announced as an evening where anyone could step forward and ask someone to dance. Clara had spent nearly an hour sitting quietly against the back wall, watching younger women receive invitations while pretending she was perfectly happy alone. But loneliness had a way of making people believe impossible things. When the music stopped and the master of ceremonies asked if anyone else was waiting for a partner, Clara had stepped onto the stage before she could lose her courage. She waited. Nobody came. Then someone laughed. "Maybe she's waiting for a miracle," a woman whispered. Another answered, "Or a cowboy old enough to remember her when she was young." More laughter followed. Clara looked toward the stairs. "Nobody wants me," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. And that was when the heavy doors at the back of the hall opened. The laughter stopped. Nathan Cole stood in the doorway. At 42, Nathan was one of the richest cattlemen in the territory. But wealth was not the first thing people noticed about him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a rugged, weathered face, dark brown hair beneath his distinctive black Stetson, and a neatly trimmed dark beard. He wore his familiar dark brown frontier coat over a black waistcoat, with worn leather boots that proved he still rode his own ranch despite owning more land than most men could cross in a day. Nearly every unmarried woman in Silver Creek had noticed Nathan when he entered, but Nathan was not looking at them. His eyes were fixed on Clara. He crossed the dance hall without speaking. People moved aside. Clara watched him approach, certain he must be heading somewhere else. Then Nathan stepped onto the stage. A nervous murmur moved through the room. He stopped directly in front of her and held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" Clara stared at him. "Mr. Cole." "Nathan, you don't have to do this." His hand remained open. "I know." She looked toward the crowd. The same people who had been laughing moments earlier were now staring at her with disbelief. "Everyone is watching." Nathan glanced around the hall. "Then let's give them something worth watching." Clara almost pulled away before touching his hand. It had been 23 years since her husband Samuel died, and even longer since she had danced without feeling as though she needed permission to enjoy herself. Nathan led her down from the stage as the piano began to play again. At first, neither spoke. Clara kept her eyes lowered. "They're going to laugh at you," she said quietly. Nathan looked directly at her. "They already did." She looked up. "At you?" "The moment I walked toward the stage." That was when Clara heard it. Nathan Cole could have any woman here, and he chose her? She could be his mother. This time, Clara tried to release his hand. Nathan did not let her pull away, but he loosened his grip enough to give her the choice. "You can walk away if you want," he said. "But don't walk away because they told you who deserves to stand beside you." Clara stared at him. For the first time that night, the humiliation inside her began to change into something else. Then Nathan leaned closer and spoke words that made her heart stop. "Clara, I didn't come here tonight looking for a dance." She frowned. "Then why are you here?" Nathan's expression turned serious. Across the room, the laughter had faded completely. "I came because I needed to find you before someone else did." And suddenly, the rich cowboy choosing the woman everyone mocked was no longer the biggest secret in the room. Clara Bennett did not answer Nathan Cole immediately. The music continued around them, but suddenly she could no longer hear it. She could only hear the strange seriousness in his voice. "I came because I needed to find you before someone else did." Clara searched his rugged face for any sign that this was another joke. Nathan remained completely still beneath his distinctive black Stetson, his dark brown hair barely visible beneath the brim, his neatly trimmed dark beard framing an expression that had lost every trace of amusement. Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of her worn charcoal wool shawl. "Who else is looking for me?" Nathan glanced toward the crowded dance hall. "Not here." She followed his eyes and immediately understood what he meant. People were still watching them. Some whispered behind gloved hands. Others stared openly. Unable to understand why Nathan Cole, the wealthy rancher who could have chosen anyone in Silver Creek, was standing beside a 68-year-old widow in a faded burgundy prairie dress. Clara stepped back from him. "If this is about my ranch, you can save yourself the trouble." Nathan's eyes returned to hers. "Your ranch? Everyone eventually wants something." Nathan studied her for a moment. "Who has been asking you to sell?" Clara hesitated. That answer alone seemed to concern him. "Nobody important." "Clara." Something about the way he said her name made her look away. "Gideon Shaw." Nathan's expression hardened. Clara noticed it immediately. "You know him." "I know enough." She folded her arms. "He owns Iron Ridge. He thinks my land should belong to him too. Has he threatened you?" "Not directly." Nathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then how?" Clara looked toward the dance floor. "First, he offered to buy the ranch. When I refused, he offered more. Then he started telling people I couldn't manage it alone." Nathan said nothing. Clara continued. "Last month, someone cut the fence on the north pasture. 2 weeks later, my cattle wandered onto another man's land. Gideon told everyone it proved I was too old to keep the ranch." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you report it?" Clara gave a bitter smile. "To whom?" He understood immediately. A widow with little money, accusing one of the most powerful ranchers in the valley, would have to prove everything. And Clara had spent 23 years learning that people often believe the man with the larger ranch. "That still doesn't explain why you're here," she said. Nathan looked toward the entrance. "Because Gideon isn't the only person interested in your land." Clara stared at him. "What do you mean?" Before Nathan could answer, a loud voice interrupted them. "Well, now I've seen everything." The crowd turned. Gideon Shaw stood near the edge of the dance floor, smiling as though the entire evening had been arranged for his entertainment. He was a thick-built man in his early 50s, with thinning sandy hair beneath a gray western hat, and a heavy face that rarely looked friendly. His expensive dark coat and polished boots made him look more like a businessman than a cowboy. Gideon slowly raised his glass toward Nathan. "Cole, if you were lonely, you could have asked. There are plenty of women here who don't need help finding a dance partner." A few uncomfortable laughs followed. Clara immediately tried to step away, but Nathan remained beside her. Gideon's eyes moved over Clara's silver-gray hair, her faded burgundy prairie dress, and her worn charcoal shawl. "No offense, Mrs. Bennett. I suppose even an old ranch needs a new owner eventually." This time, the room went silent. Clara felt the old humiliation returning. Nathan had tried to protect her from the laughter, but now the laughter had changed into something worse. She looked at him. "You should leave this alone." Nathan turned toward Gideon. "Why?" "Because this isn't your problem." Gideon smiled. "Exactly." Nathan's face became cold. "Then perhaps you should stop making it yours." Gideon's smile faded. "Careful, Cole. People are already asking why a rich man like you suddenly cares what happens to Clara Bennett." Nathan took one step closer. "Let them ask. They're saying you chose her because you're hiding something." Clara's face changed. Nathan looked at her, but she was already stepping away. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "Clara, you should never have stepped onto that stage." She turned toward the stairs. "They're not laughing at me anymore. They're laughing at you." Nathan followed her. "I don't care." Clara stopped and faced him. "Maybe you don't understand." Her voice trembled, but she refused to lower it. "I've spent years learning how to survive people looking down on me, but I won't stand here and watch them destroy your name because you felt sorry for an old woman." Nathan's expression softened. "I told you, I don't feel sorry for you." "Then why?" For the second time that night, Nathan hesitated. Then he reached inside his dark brown frontier coat and removed a folded piece of yellowed paper. Clara stared at it. Her name was written across the front, not in Nathan's handwriting. Her breath caught. "Where did you get that?" Nathan looked directly into her eyes. "It was left for me by a man who died believing that one day someone would try to take everything you own." Clara's hands began to tremble. "Who?" Nathan did not answer immediately. Outside the dance hall, a horse suddenly stopped beneath the window. Then came 3 slow knocks against the front door. Everyone turned. Gideon Shaw's face had lost its color, and Clara understood that whatever Nathan had come to tell her had already become dangerous. The 3 knocks against the front door echoed through the Silver Creek dance hall. Nobody moved. Clara Bennett stood near the edge of the stage, Her silver-gray hair still gathered in its familiar neat low bun, one hand gripping the edge of her worn charcoal wool shawl. Beside her, Nathan Cole remained tall and still, his broad shoulders tense beneath his distinctive dark brown frontier coat. His black Stetson cast a shadow across his rugged face, and for the first time since he had stepped onto the stage, Clara saw real concern in his eyes. Gideon Shaw stared toward the door. "Who is it?" he demanded. Nobody answered. The knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate strikes. Nathan stepped in front of Clara. "Stay here." Clara frowned. "Don't tell me to stay anywhere." Under different circumstances, Nathan might have smiled. Instead, he walked toward the entrance. When he opened the door, a young ranch hand stood outside beside a sweating horse. He looked exhausted. "Mr. Cole?" Nathan nodded. The ranch hand lowered his voice, but Clara heard enough to understand. "They're at the Bennett place." Clara's face went pale. "What?" Nathan turned immediately. "How many?" "At least 4 riders." Gideon Shaw quickly recovered from his surprise. "Probably nothing more than cattle trouble." Nathan's eyes moved toward him. "How did you know it was cattle trouble?" The room went silent again. Gideon slowly set down his drink. "I didn't say I knew." Nathan stared at him for a long moment, then walked back toward Clara. "We need to leave." Clara stepped away. "My ranch." "Yes. What are they doing there?" Nathan reached inside his dark brown frontier coat and pulled out the yellowed letter again. "That depends on what they already found." Clara looked at the paper. "You still haven't told me who wrote that." Nathan lowered his voice. "Your husband." Everything inside Clara seemed to stop. Samuel Bennett had been dead for 23 years. She had watched the men lower his coffin into the ground. She had spent more than 2 decades believing every secret he carried had disappeared with him. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward the letter. "Samuel?" Nathan nodded. "My father gave this to me before he died." Clara stared at the handwriting across the front. It was unmistakable. She had seen Samuel's hand on feed orders, birthday notes, and the letters he wrote when he traveled for cattle drives. "Why would your father have this?" Nathan's expression grew serious. "Because Samuel gave it to him the week before the accident." Clara looked up sharply. "It was an accident." Nathan hesitated. That hesitation frightened her more than anything he could have said. "Nathan." He glanced toward the door, then back at her. "I don't think it was." Clara's breath caught. Behind them, Gideon Shaw began walking toward the back of the hall. Nathan noticed. "Where are you going?" Gideon stopped. "Home." "In a hurry?" Gideon's face hardened. "You've made enough of a spectacle tonight." Clara suddenly stepped forward. For the first time, she did not look embarrassed or afraid of the people watching her. "Nathan," she said quietly, "read the letter." Nathan unfolded the yellowed paper. His eyes moved across the page, but Clara saw his expression change before he spoke. "Samuel wrote that if anything ever happened to him, you were not to sell the ranch."
Sometimes the people who appear in our lives at the most unexpected moment are carrying answers to questions we stopped asking years ago. Clara thought Nathan stepped onto that stage because he felt sorry for her. The people in Silver Creek thought he had made a foolish choice. But now we can see that Nathan's decision was never as simple as one dance. He came looking for Clara because someone from her past knew that one day, danger would return. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so powerful. Clara spent years believing she had been left behind by life. She believed Samuel's death was an accident. Her lonely years were simply something she had to endure, and the ranch was the only thing she had left. But while she believed her story was ending quietly, the truth was still waiting. And now, the woman who whispered, "Nobody wants me," is about to discover that someone had been searching for her all along. But what Nathan is about to reveal may change everything Clara believed about the man she loved, and the man standing in front of her may be hiding far more than either of them realizes.
Gideon turned toward them. Nathan continued. "He said there was something beneath the Bennett property that certain men would do anything to control." Clara stared at him. "What?" Nathan looked at the final line. "And he wrote that if they ever came for you, I was to find you before Gideon Shaw did." Every eye in the room turned toward Gideon. The wealthy ranch owner stood completely still. Then Clara heard something outside that made her heart pound. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. Several. The riders at her ranch were no longer the only danger. Nathan reached for her hand. "Clara, we're leaving now." She looked at the crowd. The same people who had laughed when she stood alone and whispered that nobody wanted her. Now nobody was laughing. But as Nathan led her through the dance hall, Clara understood something far more frightening than humiliation. The rich cowboy had not stepped onto that stage because he pitied her. He had stepped onto that stage because, for 23 years, someone had been waiting for the moment her past came looking for her again. Nathan Cole and Clara Bennett rode out of Silver Creek before the dance hall had fully recovered from what had happened. Clara sat behind Nathan on his powerful bay horse, her arms wrapped around his dark brown frontier coat as the cold night wind pulled at her worn charcoal wool shawl. Her silver-gray hair remained gathered in its familiar neat low bun, though several loose strands had escaped during the hurried ride. Ahead of them, Nathan's black Stetson stayed low over his dark brown hair, and his broad shoulders remained tense. Neither spoke until the lights of Silver Creek disappeared behind them. Then Clara finally broke the silence. "Stop the horse." Nathan slowed immediately. "Clara, we don't have time." "Then tell me what Samuel wrote." Nathan turned slightly toward her. "At the ranch." "No." Her voice was sharper now. "I've spent 23 years being told what I didn't need to know. I'm not doing it anymore." Nathan brought the horse to a stop beneath a pale moon. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he removed the yellowed letter from inside his dark brown frontier coat. Clara climbed down before he could help her. "Read it." Nathan unfolded the paper. "Samuel wrote that there was a natural spring beneath the eastern section of your land." Clara frowned. "I know about the spring." "Not all of it." Nathan looked at her. "According to Samuel, the water runs beneath 3 neighboring ranches. Yours is the only property sitting directly above the source." Clara stared at him. "That's why Gideon wants my land?" "Partly." Nathan's expression hardened. "The spring isn't just water. It's enough water to support every ranch in the valley during a drought." Clara slowly looked toward the darkness ahead. She suddenly understood why Gideon had spent years making offers. "Samuel found out." Nathan nodded. "He discovered Gideon and several investors were quietly buying land around yours." "But Gideon was barely starting his ranch then. His father wasn't." Clara went still. Nathan continued. "My father believed Samuel found documents proving the Shaw family had been manipulating property sales for years. When Samuel refused to sell, the pressure started." Clara's face tightened. "And then Samuel died." Nathan folded the letter. "My father never believed it was an accident." Before Clara could answer, a gunshot cracked across the open land. Nathan grabbed her and pulled her behind the horse. The animal reared, then settled, as Nathan drew his revolver. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, breathing hard. Another shot struck the dirt several yards away. Nathan's eyes searched the darkness. "They followed us." Clara looked toward the distant ridge. A rider appeared briefly against the moonlight before disappearing again. Nathan grabbed the reins. "Get on. What about you?" "Now, Clara." They rode hard toward the Bennett ranch. When they reached the property, Clara felt her stomach drop. The front gate was hanging open. One fence had been cut. A lantern burned inside the barn. Nathan dismounted first, his black Stetson still firmly in place, and helped Clara down. "Stay behind me." This time she didn't argue. Together they moved toward the barn. Nathan pushed open the door. Inside, everything appeared quiet. Then Clara saw it. Her husband's old work table had been pulled apart. Drawers were scattered across the floor. Samuel's tools lay crushed beneath muddy boots. Clara stepped forward despite Nathan's warning. They were looking for something. Nathan's gaze moved toward an old wooden beam above the workbench, or they already knew where it was. Clara looked up. Carved into the beam was a small mark she had seen hundreds of times without understanding it. A circle crossed by 3 lines. Nathan's face changed. "My father showed me that symbol once." Clara turned toward him. "What does it mean?" Nathan stepped onto the workbench and reached toward the beam. Hidden behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside sat a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Clara's hands began to tremble. Nathan placed it on the table between them. Neither touched it. Then a slow voice came from the doorway. "I was wondering how long it would take you to find that." Nathan turned sharply, placing himself in front of Clara. Gideon Shaw stood inside the barn with 2 armed men behind him. His gray western hat was gone, revealing thinning sandy hair, and the polite smile he had worn at the dance hall had disappeared completely. His eyes moved to Clara. You should have sold when I offered. Clara stared at him. You killed Samuel. Gideon smiled faintly. I didn't come here to discuss the past. Nathan's hand tightened around his revolver. Then why are you here? Gideon looked at the metal box. Because your father made one mistake before he died, Cole. He trusted the wrong man to protect it. Clara looked at Nathan. What does he mean? But Gideon was already reaching for the box. Nathan stepped forward. Don't touch it. Gideon's men raised their weapons. The barn became completely silent. Then Gideon looked directly at Clara and said something that made even Nathan go still. Samuel Bennett didn't hide that box to protect the ranch. He glanced toward the old workbench. He hid it to protect you from the truth about who really caused his death. Clara Bennett had spent 23 years believing she understood the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Samuel had ridden out one cold morning, his horse had returned without him, and by nightfall the men from Silver Creek had found him at the bottom of a rocky ravine. Everyone had called it an accident. Clara had been forced to accept it because grief did not always give a person another choice. But now she stood inside her own barn, silver-gray hair gathered in its familiar neat low bun, wearing her faded burgundy prairie dress beneath her worn charcoal wool shawl, staring at Gideon Shaw as he claimed Samuel had hidden the metal box to protect her from the truth about who had caused his death. Nathan Cole stood directly in front of her, tall and broad-shouldered beneath his distinctive dark brown frontier coat, his black Stetson low over his dark brown hair, one hand close to his revolver. You're lying, Clara said. Gideon gave a cold smile. That's what I expected you to say. Then tell me who killed him. Gideon's eyes moved toward Nathan. Ask the man standing in front of you. The barn went silent. Clara slowly looked at Nathan. His rugged face hardened beneath his neatly trimmed dark beard. Don't listen to him. But Nathan did not answer quickly enough. Clara felt something inside her change. Nathan? Gideon stepped closer to the metal box. Samuel trusted Nathan's father. That was his mistake. Nathan's voice turned sharp. My father tried to protect Samuel. Did he? Gideon asked. Or did he protect his own ranch first? Clara stared between them. What is he talking about? Nathan finally looked at her. My father knew Samuel was investigating the Shaws. Clara waited. And? Nathan swallowed. Samuel asked him to take the evidence to the territorial judge. Did he? Nathan said nothing. Gideon laughed quietly. No. His father waited. Nathan turned toward him. Because there were people inside the county office helping your family. And while he waited, Gideon replied, Samuel died. Clara stepped back as though the words had physically struck her. Nathan's father had known Samuel was in danger. Perhaps he had tried to help. Perhaps he had been afraid. But one thing was suddenly clear. Samuel had died before the evidence reached anyone who could protect him. My father regretted it until the day he died, Nathan said quietly. That's why he gave me Samuel's letter. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to cry. So you came because you owed me something. Nathan shook his head. I came because you deserved the truth. Gideon suddenly moved toward the table. Nathan drew his revolver. Don't. Gideon's two men raised their weapons, but Clara stepped forward before anyone could fire. Stop. Everyone looked at her. Clara walked past Nathan and placed both hands on the metal box. For years, men had made decisions about her life. Samuel had hidden secrets from her. Powerful ranchers had tried to take her land, and now Nathan and Gideon stood ready to fight over a truth that belonged to her. Nobody touches this, she said. Her voice was quiet, but firm. Not until I decide. Gideon stared at her in disbelief. Mrs. Bennett, you have no idea what you're doing. Clara looked directly into his eyes. That's the first thing you've been right about tonight, but I'm going to find out. She grabbed the oilcloth, pulled the metal box toward herself, and opened it. Inside were property maps, payment records, and a small bundle of letters tied with faded blue string. But Clara's attention went immediately to an old photograph lying on top. Her breath stopped. It showed Samuel standing beside Nathan's father, and a third man Clara recognized instantly. Gideon Shaw's father. Across the bottom, Samuel had written 5 words in his unmistakable handwriting. We all knew the truth. Gideon's confidence disappeared. Nathan stared at the photograph as though he had never seen it before. Clara slowly lifted her eyes toward Gideon. What truth? Before he could answer, a voice came from outside the barn. "Put the guns down." More hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Gideon's men turned toward the entrance. Nathan moved quickly, pulling Clara behind the work table as the barn doors burst open. But Clara was no longer thinking about Gideon's threats, or Nathan's family secret. She clutched the photograph against her chest and understood that the answer to Samuel's death was not buried with one man. 3 families had been connected to that secret for more than 2 decades. And now, for the first time, Clara Bennett knew exactly why Nathan Cole had stepped onto that stage when everyone believed nobody wanted her.
Clara began this story believing nobody wanted her, but in the end, she discovered that her worth was never decided by the people who laughed at her. Nathan stepped onto that stage, but Clara was the one who chose to stand strong. The lesson? Never let age, loneliness, or other people's opinions decide your value. Sometimes the moment you feel most forgotten is only the beginning of a story that changes everything.